Are you unsure on the best route to take when it comes to rebranding your business? Or maybe you're confused about the extent you need to rebrand? Well, in this episode, I'm going to go over the different types of rebrand so you can decide which one is right for you. Welcome to the Unified Brand Podcast, brought to you by Elements Brand Management, a weekly brand building and brand strategy podcast to help you unlock your brand's potential, stand out from the competition, and create impact. At Elements Brand Management, we know that no two rebrands are created equal. It depends on the objectives, it depends on the brand in question, and it depends on the reason for the rebrand. When people generally think about rebranding, they think about changing the visual identity, the messaging, and the direction. But rebranding doesn't necessarily have to be about changing or moving in a massive direction. What it can be is small incremental changes or a slight evolution to a brand. But it's something that most businesses sooner or later will have to think about. What type of rebrands are there? Number 1, evolution or brand refresh. This is the most common type of rebrand you'll see and what the majority of brands do when they rebrand. And what it is generally when a brand wants to mark a new era or an evolution to the company, but not do a massive change when it comes to the strategy or the business development point of view. So it's more of an evolution, a brand refresh, as opposed to being a complete rebrand and change of direction. The visual identity will usually change along with the messaging, but seldomly does the internal brand change. So not the positioning, not the mission, and not the vision. It's generally just a refresh of the visual identity and the messaging, a kind of overhaul of how it feels, how it looks, what the brand kind of is being presented as to the audience. And that's sort of what gets changed in this particular type of rebrand. An example of this would be the US Open rebrand, which I think was done in 2016. And with that rebrand, what they did was the previous visual identity and the previous logo was actually not recognized by the majority of the audience. So they took the US Open text away, just had the icon. And most of the audience couldn't place that as being anything to do with the US Open. So it wasn't iconic, it wasn't memorable enough. What they did was to match the prestige of the event. The agency involved, they rebranded, they added energy, vibrancy, changed the colors, but they didn't do anything to change the strategy or the positioning. They just literally rebranded it from a visual point of view, and it had a massive impact. And what it's done is it's elevated the branding to match the prestige of the event. And in fact, in this example, it was the brand that was lagging behind the company or the event in this particular example, and they brought the brand up to match the prestige of the event. And it's done a really good job. There'll be a link in the description below where you can check this out, but it's a great example of an evolution or a brand refresh. Number 2, the pivot or semi-full rebrand. This type of rebrand is when you're looking to reposition the brand or drastically extend the product line, or maybe the old brand is now a shadow of what you are now currently as a company. So you've changed so much that you need to adjust to that, or it might be that you're going after a new audience. And this type of rebrand looks at the internal brand, so it looks at the strategy, it looks at the core brand. So that'll be the mission, the vision, the values, and the purpose. And it adjusts that along with the visual identity and the brand's personality. This type of rebrand tries to keep the heritage of the brand intact, whilst moving it forward. The name will rarely change in this type of rebrand, and it's about leveraging the existing brand in order to take it in that new direction. This is what BlackBerry had to do in 2016 with the help of Cunningham Collective. They were on life support at that time because of the iPhone and other smartphones coming in and knocking this once industry leader off the top of the category. So they applied a pivot rebrand, and they managed to rebrand themselves and reposition the brand as a security software and services company dedicated to the enterprise of things. So they shifted from just selling phones that had really great security to a security software and systems supplier dedicated to the enterprise of things. So it was a complete pivot. They had to change because the business was on life support. And this is a great example of a pivot rebrand or a semi-full rebrand. They kept the name, the logo stayed pretty much the same, the identity stayed the same, but they pivoted, they changed their messaging, and they changed their strategy, and they changed the brand direction. Comment below with the best examples of rebrands you've seen and which has been your favorite. Number 3, overhaul or full rebrand. And this is rarer than the other 2 rebrands we've seen so far, and it's generally used when the business is in such a position that you completely need to change direction A lot of the times it's a name change as well, or it might be that you've had an acquisition or merger and the rebrand needs to reflect both parties and how the brand has kind of changed to encompass both of these parties. Or it might be that you're trying to signal to your audience that you have no connection to what the brand was previously. This is also sometimes needed when you're venturing into new markets or territories in order to resonate with the local audience or community. This type of rebrand can actually involve a complete name change, full visual identity change, change in strategy, the internal brand, and the personality. It doesn't always have to have a name change, but a lot of times it will. And if you're doing an acquisition or merger, it might be two names coming together or an amalgamation of the two. Or you might find that if it's a business at a point where they're looking to really shift direction and change focus and get away from what the brand was previously, or they're venturing into a new industry or category, that they will completely change in terms of name and everything to do with the brand. An example of this would be Instagram. So before it was Instagram, before the photo sharing platform took off, it was called Bourbon, and it was a location sharing app. So you'd go to a location, you take photos, you'd earn points for sort of checking in and uploading photos. Now this didn't take off at all. So they completely rebranded as something totally different as Instagram and just took the photo sharing part of that app and used that. And obviously that's had massive success because of that type of rebrand. They did a full rebrand. So they shifted their focus for what the business sort of model was, what they were focusing on, what their strategy was. They changed the name, they changed the visual identity, and they changed the audience. And the full rebrand in that case helped them a lot because it's obviously where Instagram is today, obviously being acquired by Facebook. And if they hadn't have done that, who knows where that app Bourbon would be today. Number 4, the incremental or brand update. So this is something that you see a lot of big brands doing, and it's slightly different to the previous 3 that we've shared. It's closer to the first one, the evolution type of rebrand. And what it is what you see brands like Shell and Starbucks doing. So it's small incremental changes, generally moving forwards in time. There's minimal changes to the visual identity. The brand is staying the same. It's just a refresh visually. And a lot of times that could be due to technology. It might be to do with simplifying the brand due to them building up enough brand equity over time to be able to do that. So say with Starbucks, they've removed the lettering around the edge of the logo and it's just the mermaid now. Or if you look at Shell, it's just the shell. Or if you look at MasterCard now, what they've done is they've removed MasterCard from underneath and you've just got the 2 circles. And this is because they've built up enough brand equity over decades of having the same brand and just incrementally changing it that they can simplify, and it's still iconic, it's still memorable, and it still triggers that recognition in sort of the general public and their audience. These are generally more about marking a new chapter for the business. So it's marking signal to the audience that there is something happening that's a slight change, but keeping hold of that heritage. So they don't want it to change too much. It's just a sort of a new coat of paint, but not to the extent of, say, the US Open, which we mentioned in the first example. It's more of a slight change, just an incremental change. And what this is telling the audience is they're keeping up with the times, the brand is evolving, but it's also staying true to its roots and its heritage. We've just put together a weekly brand tip video series, which is designed to help you to unlock your brand's potential and stand out from the competition. And if you're interested, if you just go to elementsbrandmanagement, all one word, .co.uk/weekly-brand-tips, sign up and you'll be delivered a 3 to 5 minute video a week straight to your inbox. I'll put a link in the show notes if you're interested. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to receive more, you can subscribe in all the usual places. We're talking iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. Please, if you get a chance, rate and review. It helps the podcast to kind of get a bit more visibility and allows us to keep on producing these podcasts. Have a great week. Catch up soon. Keep those brands unified.